Welcome to Whispers and Fire audiobooks, where cold whispers meet burning hearts. In the quiet of winter, every whisper carries a story, and every story carries a spark. This is Whispers and Fire audiobooks. Fields of revelation, roots in the soil, storms and anchors. Welcome back to Frozen Whispers, the Marines airport test that ignited eternal love. In Episode 1, Jake and Tracy met as strangers in a frozen airport terminal and walked away with something neither of them expected: hope. But now, in Episode 2, their story shifts from fluorescent lights to open Iowa skies. This is where everything changes. Jake arrives at the farm searching for peace, not knowing Tracy is already there, and when their paths collide again under the ancient oak tree, the truth he's been hiding threatens to break everything or finally set him free. In this episode, you'll see their connection deepen through shared work, quiet confessions, and the kind of moments that only happen when two wounded souls finally stop running. But healing isn't gentle. And when Jake's past storms rise in the middle of the night, Tracy must decide whether she's strong enough and brave enough to stay. Episode 2 is where their walls crack, their stories intertwine, and their hearts begin to root in the same soil. Let's step into the fields and continue their journey. Legal disclaimer. This novel presents a work of fiction. The story, including all characters, plot lines, and settings, is completely fabricated and not based on any specific real-life individuals, historical events, or actual locations, past, present, or future. No representation is made regarding the accuracy of any events depicted, and any opinions expressed are those of the fictional characters, not the creator. This story is for entertainment purposes only. Content warning and resources. Pinned by creator J. H. D. Langren. This novel discusses mature themes including trauma, PTSD, past suicidal ideation, domestic violence, and institutional corruption. If these topics are difficult for you, please prioritize your well-being. You are not alone. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. Every country has local support lines. Check your region's emergency and mental health services for the most accurate numbers. Remember, help is available worldwide. If your country isn't listed, please search online for local hotlines or emergency services in your area. You deserve support and safety. Fields of revelation. The Iowa sun climbed high, a fierce, benevolent eye in a vast blue dome, baking the earth into a fragrant haze of rich soil and the promise of abundance. The air hummed with the industry of insects and the rustling whisper of countless corn leaves. Tracy approached the field's edge, a woven basket swinging from her hand like a pendulum of her own nervous anticipation. Jake paused mid-swing, the hammer freezing in its arc. He straightened, the tool dangling from his calloused fingers. Sweat gleamed on his arms and face, tracing paths over the landscape of old scars. His gaze, those sharp green sentinels, locked onto hers, and she saw a storm brewing beneath their forced calm. "Tracy," he said, his voice rough as the gravel road she'd walked down, but now laced with something entirely new, pure, unvarnished wonder. "Jake." She stopped a few paces away, the sun warming the flush that rose on her cheeks. Up close, in the honest light of day, he was more than she'd remembered. More present. The profound loneliness she'd sensed in the terminal still clung to him like a shadow, but here was countered by visible purpose, a quiet pride in the honest work of his hands. Elena sent lunch. Figured the fields have a way of eating men alive if they're not careful. Her voice trembled slightly, the memory of her whispered confession making her feel both bold and terrifyingly exposed. The familiar sight of the lone oak tree steadied her. This was a place of peace, of girlhood picnics with Elena where they'd plotted futures under its benevolent shade. Jake stood like that tree, steady, rooted, and immovable. It unsettled her, made her feel vulnerable in ways she hadn't expected. He set the hammer down in the toolbox with deliberate care, wiping his palms on his worn jeans as he stepped closer. The air between them thickened, charged with the same pre-storm static she remembered from their first meeting. "Didn't expect this." "You." The word hung in the air, a palpable admission. shock warred with gnawing guilt. Seeing her here, on this farm he'd chosen as refuge from complexity, felt like either fate's cruelest joke or its most generous gift. She held out the basket, their fingers brushing during the exchange. A spark of electricity, familiar and thrilling, jolted up her arm. Ham sandwiches. Elena's secret recipe. Real lemonade, the kind that makes you pucker. They settled in the dappled shade of the ancient oak, its leaves casting a mosaic of light and shadow upon them. The tree felt like sacred space, its gnarled roots twisting deep into the earth, a silent witness to generations of Russell and now Hayes lives. This spot, Tracy said, unpacking the checkered cloth and food, my grandparents planted it the day my father was born. Said it would grow to shade all his biggest dreams. Jake took a sandwich, the simple, homely act feeling profoundly grounding. Here, under the open sky, conversation flowed easier than it had in the fluorescent prison of an airport or the turbulent confines of a plane. Tracy spoke of the farm's long history, her voice painting pictures of childhood summers spent chasing fireflies until they collapsed in breathless giggles, of Elena's wedding right here under this very canopy of leaves. It's home, she concluded softly, even when the skyscrapers of Chicago scream louder. Her business worries slipped in naturally, it was who she was. Clients vanishing like morning mist. But I built that firm brick by stubborn brick. I won't let it crumble now. She paused, eyes fixed on the distant horizon where land met sky. After the flood, my dad looked at me, his eyes hollow, and said, "Tracy, life's floods come. You either dam them or you drown." So I dammed. The firm is my dam. Right now, I can feel the cracks, but I'm holding. The vulnerability of the admission surprised her. With Jake, her walls seemed to lower of their own accord, like floodgates finally cracking under long-contained pressure. Jake watched her, admiring the fierce determination that so clearly mirrored his own lost military discipline. "Sounds like you're still fighting," he observed, his voice low. He hesitated, the familiar internal barricade rising, then deliberately chose to lower it. "Me? The Corps, they let me go after, well." His hand came up, unconsciously tracing the path of the scar. The ambush. I lost my squad. Came home and couldn't fit anywhere. My family stepped back when they saw me like this, didn't fit their world. Jobs? Can't sit still in a cubicle, flinch at loud noises. So, fields. They're open, honest. No one watching. No judgment. The words poured out, rawer and more unfiltered than they had been on the plane. Memory gripped him, the sterile white of the hospital room. The way he'd avoided mirrors, the day his mother visited, her expensive perfume jarring against antiseptic smell. Her hand had hovered, not quite touching him. "We love you, Jacob, but you need help. You need to fix this." Fix it. As if he were a malfunctioning appliance, not her son. He'd signed himself out the next day, heading nowhere, the endless road his only constant companion. Tracy's eyes softened, but held no pity, only deep, resonant empathy. "Broken is just a word people use for things they don't understand," she said, her voice firm. "You're here, swinging that hammer like it matters. Your purpose isn't lost, Jake. It's just waiting for you to recognize it in a new form." Her hand reached out, covering his for a brief, electrifying moment. "My version of broken was watching this farm disappear underwater. I watched my father break, piece by piece, right in front of me. Mom took extra teaching gigs, I took out loans. But this place, Elena's place now, it's the anchor that kept us from drifting away entirely." She paused. "It feels like you might be part of this anchor now, too." Her words were a direct echo of her airport whisper, and Jake's throat tightened unbearably. The shadow of his deception loomed large, a stain on this perfect, honest moment. Overwhelmed by her nearness, by the sense of belonging that wrapped around them both like steady, growing vines, he set the half-eaten sandwich down. Tracy'd about the airport. She tilted her head, curiosity and a hint of concern flickering in her warm eyes. "What about it?" Guilt surged, hot and sharp as fresh shrapnel. "I wasn't asleep. Not all the way. When you came over, covered me with your scarf, touched my hair, when you whispered. Her face drained of color, then bloomed with deep, mortified crimson. The realization crashed over her. He heard every foolish, romantic word. She stood abruptly, the basket forgotten at her feet. You why? I thought you were, humiliation warred with a sense of betrayal. To test you, he confessed, the words tumbling out in a raw, desperate rush. He rose to his feet, closing the small, charged gap between them. I've been burned, Tracy. So many times. People see the scar, the wounded vet, and they want a piece. A story to tell their friends. Pity to make themselves feel good. Or they see a project, something broken they can fix to prove their own goodness. So I faked it. I lay there and I watched. And you... His voice cracked, the memory of her tenderness undoing him completely. You were just care. No agenda. Just pure you. You whispered a future I was sure I didn't deserve. It froze me solid, Tracy. I was astonished. So damn ashamed. Your kindness, it's the most real thing I've felt in years. It melted walls around my heart I didn't even know were made of ice. Memory flashed his girlfriend before deployment, her promises of letters and waiting. The letters had stopped coming after news of his injury reached her. The one time she'd called, her voice had been cold as the discharge papers in his hand. I just can't do damaged goods, Jake. Tracy stared at him, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. The embarrassment was real, a hot flush on her skin, but it was being steadily eclipsed by something else, profound recognition of his staggering honesty, the sheer, vulnerable courage it took to admit this. She saw the wounded boy in the guarded man, the one who'd been hurt too many times. Her own doubt surfaced. Mark's proposal, the diamond ring glinting like a tiny, beautiful chain. I do, she'd said, but 6 months in, she'd found the texts from other women. You're just too focused, Tracy, he blamed. Focused. Code for too independent, too strong, destined to be alone. Look at me, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. When his tormented gaze met hers, she stepped closer, into his space, into his pain. I meant every word, she said, her voice gaining strength. I saw you, Jake. Not the scar. The man. Lonely, and so incredibly strong. A man ready for more, even if you doubt it every second. Relief, profound and absolute, crashed through him. His own cynical judgment, his most deeply ingrained defense mechanism, had nearly cost him this. I'm sorry, he breathed, the words a prayer. For doubting you, for testing you. You proved me wrong in the best way a man can ever be proven wrong. Their breaths mingled in the small space between them, the fields around them seeming to whisper their approval. Tracy's hand came up, her fingers finding his cheek with gentle certainty. She traced the line of his scar with a reverence that felt like healing, her touch sealing the wounds of the past. No more tests, she asked, her voice a soft promise. No more tests, he vowed, his voice firm. Just us and what we can build. The moment stretched between them, charged, sacred, terrifying in its possibility. Then, as if drawn by invisible threads, they moved closer. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question asked and answered. Then deeper, more certain. A promise exchanged, without words. It was intense and tender all at once. It was their passion born of painful revelation. It was trust being forged in the crucible of whispered secrets. His cynicism yielding to fragile, but newfound faith. Her quiet hope blooming into fierce conviction. The ancient oak sheltered them, the endless fields bearing silent witness. In that moment, the ghosts of the past finally began to recede. Bennett's face, smiling in approval. Her father's slumped shoulders, finally straightening. All replaced by the vivid, overwhelming now. They parted, breathless, standing close, not letting go of each other, and their lips still touching. Tell me more, she said, sinking back to the ground and pulling him down beside her, their shoulders touching. He did. He told her squad stories that made her laugh through tears, described the deafening roar of the ambush and the haunting, empty silence that followed. She shared, in return, the terrifying rage of the flood, the grinding pressure of the city, and the saving grace of Elena's unwavering friendship. Hours slipped away unnoticed, the sun dipping toward the horizon. Their separate stories wove together like roots under rich, fertile soil, promising a harvest they were only just beginning to imagine. As shadows lengthened across the field, Tracy leaned her head against his shoulder. "You know what I think?" "What's that?" "I think we've both been holding our breath for so long we forgot we were doing it. We were waiting for permission to just breathe." Jake wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Then let's breathe. Together." It was there under the ancient oak, with the Iowa earth beneath them and endless sky above. Two broken souls finally exhaled, finding in each other not rescue, but recognition. Not someone to fix them, but someone to stand beside them while they fix themselves. The fields whispered their approval, and for the first time in what felt like forever, both Jake and Tracy felt something they'd almost forgotten. Hope. Roots in the soil. Days blurred into a rhythm as ancient and natural as the sunrise. Jake threw himself into the farm's unending demands with a fervor that was part penance, part prayer. He was up before the birds, mending fences in the cool, dewy dawn, the rhythmic thwack of the hammer a satisfying counterpoint to the chaos in his memory. He spent afternoons harvesting corn under the relentless sun, the sharp leaves leaving fine, stinging cuts on his arms that felt more like absolution than injury. Evenings were spent cleaning tools by the soft, golden glow of a kerosene lantern, the metallic scrape a soothing mantra. Harlan watched him, a silent, grizzled sentinel, before finally grunting his approval. "Boy, you work like the land itself owes you a debt." But Jake's mind was never truly on the work. It was constantly orbiting Tracy, who had, to his profound gratitude, extended her stay, citing urgent business calls that were transparent excuses to linger in this new, shared reality. Tracy dove into the fabric of farm life with the same determined grace she applied to her spreadsheets. She helped Elena in the kitchen, the air rich with the scent of baking bread and simmering stew, and sat with Harlan on the porch, plotting irrigation lines and crop rotations, her sharp mind finding a new, satisfying puzzle in the land. But her orbit, too, had a fixed center. Mornings, she would bring a steaming mug of coffee out to the barn, the exchange of the warm ceramic a ritual that made their fingers linger, a silent conversation passing between them. Afternoons were for long, meandering walks along the creek beds, the water babbling secrets as her head found its natural resting place on his shoulder. "My firm's turning a corner," she'd say one day, her eyes bright with renewed fire. "I have a new client, a family farm focused on sustainable agriculture. It feels like it fits here with all this." But she also delved deeper, into the soft, bruised parts of her past she usually kept guarded. "After the divorce from Mark, I just threw myself into the work." He wanted the polished, city trophy wife, not the woman who got dirt under her nails building something from nothing. He said I was distant. Her voice hitched, a rare crack in her composure. "I was just surviving. The nights in that apartment alone, a glass of wine in one hand, my laptop glowing with spreadsheets, that was my entire world." In turn, Jake opened up in fragile, precious fragments. He shared squad stories that were laced with booming laughter one moment and heavy, respectful silence the next. He confessed the truth about the inheritance, the oil money that sat in a bank like a gilded cage, buying a freedom that felt hollow because it came with no peace. "I'm a drifter no more," he'd murmur into her hair, her hand a warm, steady anchor in his. "I've got a mission now." During one walk, a horrific memory gripped him. The road just after his discharge, rain lashing against the grimy window of a cheap motel, Bennett's dog tags clutched so tightly in his fist they left imprints on his palm. "What now?" he'd whispered into the suffocating dark. Now, with Tracy's head on his shoulder and the solid earth beneath his feet, he felt the first, tentative glimmer of an answer. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the fields in shades of orange and violet, Jake turned to her, his expression serious. "Tracy," he began, his voice low. What if I invest in your company? Not a loan, an investment, a partner. I have no need for the money, and you can use it to really turn things around, to build that dam stronger without worrying about every crack. Tracy stared at him, stunned. Jake, that's a massive offer. I can't just… You can, he interrupted gently. Let me help you build something, Tracy. Not just for you, but for us. That sustainable agriculture client you mentioned? That's a future. Let's build it together. They discussed it late into the night, sitting on the porch steps under a blanket of stars. It wasn't a transaction. It was a covenant. He wasn't saving her. He was believing in her. Finally, with tears of relief and overwhelming gratitude in her eyes, she agreed. Okay, she whispered. Partners. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning far beyond business. The connection between them deepened with each passing day, no longer a subtle undercurrent, but a constant, magnetic pull. One sweltering afternoon, after a particularly grueling harvest that had left his muscles aching and his shirt soaked through, Jake found Tracy in the relative cool of the barn. She was sorting harnesses and tools with that focused, efficient grace he'd come to adore. Dust motes danced in the slanted bars of sunlight cutting through the gloom, catching in her auburn hair like tiny sparks. He moved behind her, his presence announced only by the shift in the air. Need help? She straightened instantly, turning to face him. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the dusty barn, the golden light, the charged space between their bodies. I can handle it, she said, but her voice was soft, her eyes saying something entirely different. I know you can. His hand came up, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. But maybe you don't have to. Not anymore. The touch was simple, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. Tracy's breath caught. In that moment, all the walls she'd built, the ones constructed after Mark's betrayal, after years of fighting alone, crumbled. Jake, his name was a question and an answer. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones with a tenderness that made her chest ache. I see you, Tracy. All of you. The strength, the struggle, and the dreams you're afraid to speak out loud. I see it all, and it's… He paused, searching for words. It's everything. She reached up, her fingers finding the scar that ran down his temple and jaw, the mark he'd worn like armor against the world. But with her touch, it became something else. Proof of survival. Evidence of strength. You're not broken, she whispered. You never were. When their lips met, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was deliberate, a promise being made, a future being chosen. The kiss deepened slowly, each moment a revelation, each touch a question answered. Time lost meaning. The barn, the farm, the world beyond. It all faded until there was only this, two people who had been lost finding themselves in each other. Later, they sat in the hay, backs against the workbench, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The physical closeness was comfortable now, natural, not a barrier crossed but a truth acknowledged. I used to have nightmares, Tracy said quietly, about the flood. The water rising, my father's face as he watched everything wash away. I'd wake up gasping, feeling like I was drowning. And now, she paused, considering. Now I still have them sometimes. But when I wake up, I remember this. The farm. Elena. You. She turned to look at him. I remember I'm not alone anymore. Jake's throat tightened. The ambush comes back to me too. Every day, some version of it. The explosion, Bennett's face. The moment everything went to hell. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. But you're right. It's different now. The memories are still there, but they don't own me anymore. What changed? He looked at her, really looked, seeing the woman who'd knelt beside him in an airport terminal and offered kindness to a stranger, who'd whispered about futures and possibilities to someone she thought was sleeping, who'd forgiven him for testing her, and then opened her heart anyway. You did, he said simply. You changed everything. The days continued their gentle rhythm. Jake worked the fields with renewed purpose, Each task no longer an escape, but a contribution, building something real, something lasting. Tracy split her time between the farm and remote work for her company, her new sustainable agriculture client providing the bridge between her two worlds. Evenings found them on the porch with Elena and Harlan, sharing meals and stories. The older couple watched the growing connection between Jake and Tracy with knowing smiles, recognizing in them the same journey they'd taken years ago, two wounded souls finding healing in each other and in the land. One night, after dinner, Tracy and Jake retreated to the guest room. The house was quiet save for the symphony of crickets outside and the occasional creak of settling beams. Moonlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting ethereal patterns across the quilted bed. Tracy stood by the window, looking out at the fields bathed in silver light. Jake came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future," she admitted. "For the first time in years, I can actually see one. A real one. Not just business plans and client meetings, but life. A life with roots." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I spent years running from everything, the memories, the pain, the possibility of being hurt again. I convinced myself that being alone was safer." He paused, his green eyes holding hers. "But you showed me something different. You showed me that being seen, really seen, isn't a weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do." Tracy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I was so afraid of needing anyone. After my father's loss, after Mark, after every client who left, I built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. And now," she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and softened all the hard edges she'd carried for so long. "Now I think maybe those walls were keeping out the very things I needed most." They stood there in the moonlight, two people who'd been broken by life, finding wholeness in each other. Not because either of them was fixed or complete, but because they'd found someone willing to stand beside them through the healing. "Stay," Jake said, and it wasn't about the night or the room or even the farm. It was bigger than that, a question about forever. "I'm not going anywhere," Tracy answered, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. They held each other as the moon traced its path across the sky, two hearts beating in sync, two souls finally, blessedly home. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Jake discovered that purpose wasn't found in running or hiding, but in planting roots deep enough to weather any storm. Tracy learned that ambition and connection weren't enemies, that she could build her empire and tend to her heart at the same time. Together, they began to dream bigger. Plans for expanding the sustainable agriculture consulting. Ideas for bringing veterans to work the land, offering them the same healing Jake had found. A future where her business acumen and his understanding of loss could create something meaningful. But more than any plan or project, they had each other. In the quiet moments before dawn when nightmares still came, they had hands to hold. In the bright afternoon sun, when the work felt endless, they had shared laughter. In the soft twilight hours when the past whispered its old pains, they had gentle reminders that tomorrow could be different. The farm had done its work, just as Elena had promised. It had taken two broken people and given them the space to heal, to grow, to become something more together than they ever could have been alone. Under the watchful eye of the ancient oak, beside the whispering cornfields, Jake and Tracy weren't just surviving anymore. They were living, and for two people who'd spent so long just trying to make it through each day, that was nothing short of a miracle. Storms and anchors. The weeks slipped by in the farm's unhurried embrace, days blurring into a rhythm of sun-dappled fields and evenings laced with Tracy's laughter echoing off the barn walls. But it was on the seventh night that the actual storm broke, not the kind that rattled shutters with wind and hail, but one brewed deep in the marrow, the sort that clawed its way up from forgotten trenches. Jake jolted awake in the guest room, the simple bed with its iron frame and faded quilt suddenly feeling like a battlefield snare. He was thrashing, sheets twisted around his legs like barbed wire, sweat soaking through his t-shirt. The nightmare gripped him still, dust-choked streets exploding in a bloom of fire and screams, the IED's roar swallowing everything. Bennett's face, young and intense under the helmet, bloodied and slack, mouthing silent words across the chaos. "Why me, Sarge? Why not you?" Before the world went black. He bolted upright, his chest heaving, the scar down his right side throbbing like a fresh wound ripped open. Moonlight slanted through the lace curtains, silvering the room's edges, the worn dresser with Elena's wildflower vase, the hooked rug soft under his bare feet. "Jake." Tracy's voice cut through the fog, low and steady, an anchor tossed into roiling seas. She'd been sleeping in the armchair by the window, had been for the past few nights, refusing to leave him alone with his demons. She was at his side in an instant, her hand finding his arm in the dark. Her touch was warm, steady, but it trembled just a fraction. Fear flickered in her hazel eyes, wide and shadowed. She knew this territory too well. Her own nightmares were a mirror of water rising relentless, black and cold, swallowing the old family house. Her parents' voices calling from the flood's maw, faint and fading. "Tracy, honey, hold on," until she'd wake gasping. He flinched at first, instinct pulling him away, breath ragged and sharp as he scrubbed a hand over his face. "Sorry," he muttered, the word rough, edged with that old cynicism flaring hot in his gut. "Don't burden her. She's too good for this mess, and she's too whole." The drifter in him whispered to bolt, to grab his duffel and vanish into the pre-dawn fields like he'd done 100 times before. But her hand held fast, gentle fingers curling around his arm, thumbs stroking the tense muscle in slow, soothing arcs that spoke louder than please. "Tell me," she said, not a demand but an invitation, soft as the moonlight pooling on the floorboards. She settled on the edge of the bed, close but not crowding, giving him space to breathe while making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. No pity in her gaze. Just that quiet understanding, the kind forged in her own late-night battles with boardroom betrayals and empty apartments. He exhaled, long and shuddering, the words tumbling out like shrapnel as the first gray light of dawn crept in. They talked till the birds stirred in the eaves, voices weaving through the dim room. The ambush in brutal detail, the way the Humvee had flipped like a child's toy, dust and blood thick in his throat. Losses named one by one, Bennett with his crooked grin and endless card tricks, Ellis who hummed off-key country tunes on watch, gone in a blink. Guilt festered under his ribs, raw and infected. "Felt like a machine after," he confessed, voice cracking, staring at the curtains sway as if it held answers. "Used up and discarded. The Corps shipped me stateside with a pat on the back and a psych eval, unfit for duty, except for the desk kind. Family." His laugh was bitter. "Ma sent condolences in a card, like I was a distant cousin. Sister." She took one look at the scars in the hospital and said, "You're not the brother I remember." He pulled a chain from under his shirt, Bennett's dog tags glinting dully in the growing light. Tried to send these home to his folks. They came back stamped return to sender. He let them dangle between them, heavy as accusations. Tracy listened without interruption, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. When he fell quiet, she reached for the tags, holding them in her palm as if weighing his sorrow. "You're no machine, Jake Lang," she whispered fiercely. Her hand came up to his face, fingers gently tracing the scar that ran down his temple and jaw. The touch was reverent, acknowledging the pain without flinching from it. "Your heart beats strong and true. You survived because you were meant to. Not to carry this alone, but to find someone who'd help you carry it." She paused, her own voice growing thick. "Let me carry some of this. Please. We're in this together now." Her story unfurled in turn, words spilling easy in the confessional hush. The divorce papers slapped on her desk mid-conference call, Mark's secretary lingering in the doorway with that knowing smirk. He said I focused too much on the firm, on climbing ladders he couldn't see. I called Elena that night, sobbing over her kitchen table. She laughed, a watery sound. But the truth? I was terrified to need anyone. Built walls higher than skyscrapers. Thought ambition was armor. She looked out the window at the lightning fields. The farm. Elena's arms, her no-nonsense love. That was my therapy. working the dirt until my hands remembered what mattered. Dawn brought fragile clarity, the sky outside bleeding pink and gold over the fields, birdsong filtering in like a benediction. Jake's walls, those fortress remnants of suspicion and solitude, crumbled fully like they were dust in the light. They sat together in silence for a long time, shoulders touching, two people who'd been drowning finally breaking the surface together. "Stay with me," Tracy whispered. "Not just today, and not just tonight. Stay." Jake turned to her, seeing in the morning light the woman who'd knelt beside him in an airport terminal, who'd whispered dreams to a stranger, who'd forgiven his test and opened her heart anyway, who now sat with him through his darkest hours without judgment or pity. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and meant it with everything he had. By mid-morning, Jake found Harlan in the equipment shed, the older man elbow-deep in a tractor's guts, grease streaking his forearms. Jake leaned against the doorframe, words sticking at first, then pouring out, the nightmare's echo, Tracy's steady hand, the ache for something solid. Harlan straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, his blue eyes sharp under bushy brows. "War's a thief, son," he said. His voice was gravelly from years of early mornings and hard work. "Steals your stride, your sleep, and it leaves you hollowed out. But love, that's the restitution, the quiet payback that fills the cracks." He clapped Jake on the shoulder, his grip firm. "Lost my leg to a landmine in '68, knee-deep in some godforsaken rice paddy. Woke up to a wife who couldn't stomach the new normal, packed her bags for a man with 2 good feet and a steady paycheck. Thought I'd drift forever." His expression softened. Then Elena showed up at the VA hospital with her cousin, volunteering. She stuck. "Saw the man under the injury. That's what you got with Tracy, son. Don't let it slip away." Jake took a breath, the words he'd been rehearsing suddenly feeling momentous. "I want to stay. Permanently. Take on the foreman role. Make this place my home." Harlan's nod was slow, appraising, then broke into a grin that creased his weathered face. About time the fields had a young buck with fire in his belly. "Welcome home, Lang." The handshake they exchanged was more than an agreement. It was a covenant, a passing of torch from one broken soldier to another who'd finally found his ground. That afternoon sealed it for Tracy. Her laptop perched on the kitchen table amid Elena's jars of preserves, sunlight slanting through the gingham curtains. The call from Chicago hummed with possibility and second chances. The remote setup approved, her corner office traded for a farm-based life, her consulting branching into sustainable agriculture designs that married her city's smarts to this soil-deep world. She hung up, heart pounding like a victory drum, and flew into Elena's arms. The hug was fierce and flour-dusted from pie crusts. "My roots are here," she breathed against her cousin's shoulder. Her voice was thick with emotion. "With him. No more running from floods or failures. This is the high ground." Elena pulled back, her eyes shimmering and her hands cupping Tracy's face like a cherished daughter. "Like the farm after that deluge," she said, her voice catching. "The river took the barn, half the topsoil, left us knee-deep in muck. But we rebuilt, stronger, deeper footings and with hardier crops." She smiled through her tears. "You too? You're my best harvest yet." That evening, as the sun painted the fields in shades of amber and rose, Jake and Tracy walked to the old oak tree, their tree now. They stood in its shade, looking out over the land that had become their shared refuge. "I never thought I'd find this," Jake said quietly. "A place to belong. Someone to belong with." Tracy leaned into him, his arm coming naturally around her shoulders. "We found each other when we both needed it most. Two people running from their pasts, and somehow we ran into each other instead of away." "No more running," he promised. "No more running," she agreed. As darkness fell and the first stars emerged, they walked back to the farmhouse together. The nightmares would still come, for both of them. The scars wouldn't fade, the memories wouldn't disappear. But they wouldn't face them alone anymore, and in the quiet certainty of that truth, they found something neither had dared to hope for, not just survival, but the courage to truly live again. Together, they were finally home. That night, After the confessions and tears, after the promises made in dawn's early light, they found themselves in a space of profound vulnerability. The walls between them had finally, completely fallen. Tracy sat beside him on the bed, moonlight painting everything in silver and shadow. She took his hand, turning it over in hers, tracing the calluses on his palm, new ones from farm work layered over old ones from carrying rifles and pulling brothers from burning vehicles. "Let me love you," she whispered. Not a request for passion, but a promise of acceptance. "All of you. Every scar, every nightmare, every moment you think makes you unworthy. Let me love all of it." Jake's throat tightened. In the desert, he dreamed of home, of soft touches without pity, of hands that held rather than examined. He'd imagined someone who could see past the damage to the man still fighting to exist underneath. "You already do," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's what terrifies me." She cupped his face, her thumbs brushing the jagged scar along his jaw. "I know terrified. I've lived there for years. But I'm choosing this, choosing us, anyway." They held each other in the moonlight, two people who'd spent so long protecting themselves finally allowing someone past the barricades. The intimacy wasn't in bodies joining, but in souls recognizing each other, in the profound trust of being seen completely and not turning away. "I used to think I was too broken for this," Jake confessed. "Too much damage. Too many ghosts." "And I thought I was too hardened," Tracy replied. "Too independent. Too scarred by ambition and failure." "Maybe we're exactly broken enough," he suggested, "to understand what the other needs to heal." In the quiet that followed, they shared whispers about fears neither had voiced before. Her anxieties about motherhood lost to career climbs, the biological clock she'd ignored until it seemed too late. His terror of fatherhood, of passing on trauma, of being as absent and judgmental as his own father had been. "I don't know if I can give you children," she said, the admission breaking something open inside her. "I'm 40. The window is closing, if it's not already shut." "I don't need you to give me anything," Jake said fiercely. "You've already given me everything that matters, a reason to stop running. A place to belong. Someone who sees me and doesn't flinch. But what if you want? What I want is you. This. A life we build together, whatever shape that takes." He pulled her closer. "We get to decide what our future looks like. No one else." The healing bloomed in the honesty. It was like fragile petals in the moonlight. The days that followed wove them tighter into the fabric of each other's lives. Evenings found them in Elena's kitchen, Tracy teaching Jake spreadsheets for the farm's ledgers over mugs of chamomile tea, his brow furrowing in concentration until she'd laugh and kiss the crease away. "Numbers are just battles with columns instead of rifles," he'd grumble, but his eyes sparkled when the totals balanced. In return, he showed her self-defense holds out by the barn, not because she needed protection, but because she'd asked, curious about the discipline that had shaped him. His body pressed close in demonstration, hands guiding her stance with professional precision that occasionally dissolved into laughter when she deliberately got it wrong just to see him demonstrate again. "You're doing that on purpose," he accused, grinning. "Prove it," she challenged, and they'd tumble into the hayloft for stolen afternoons of conversation and connection, talking about everything and nothing, building the thousand small moments that transform strangers into partners. Their physical closeness grew naturally, comfortably, a hand on the small of her back as they walked, his arm around her shoulders on the porch swing, her head finding its natural resting place against his chest. The intimacy of shared space, of bodies learning each other's rhythms without urgency or performance. "Equals," he'd whisper against her hair as they sat together watching sunsets. It was trust earned every day. "Every day," she'd echo and mean it. But Tracy's doubts surfaced in quiet moments, creeping like fog over the fields. One evening, as they swayed on the porch swing, crickets chirping their lullaby, she voiced the fears that had been building. "I'm 40, Jake. You're 25. She stared out at the darkening fields. 15 years. That's not nothing. I have stretch marks from dreams that didn't stick, a ring finger that remembers the weight of a marriage that failed. The firm," she paused. God, the failures. Clients bolting, me too ambitious for anyone's good, including my own. He turned to face her fully, green eyes steady as plow lines. You think those things matter to me? Tracy, every one of those flaws, your listing is proof that you lived. You fought. You built something from nothing. You survived losses that would have broken someone weaker. But the age is a number. What matters is this. He took her hand, pressed it over his heart. You make me want to be better, to heal, to build instead of run. That's not age. That's who you are. She felt tears prick her eyes, remembering her first big client win. Champagne popped alone in a dim office, bubbles fizzing flat without a hand to clink glasses with. Now, everything was shared. Every victory, every setback, every quiet moment on a porch swing. Our future is that whispered truth from the airport, he continued. The one you thought I was sleeping through. Fields, open skies, building something real together. That's what I want. That's what we're already doing. She leaned into him, letting his certainty anchor her doubts. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The farm's harvest festival tested them that weekend. The air was alive with the scent of caramel corn and wood smoke, strings of lanterns swaying like fireflies caught in twine. Locals thronged the fairgrounds, hay bale maze for the kids, blue ribbon pies sweating under glass, and fiddles sawing lively reels under the harvest moon. But prying eyes followed Jake and Tracy like shadows. Whispers rippled through the crowd, the vet drifter and the city girl. What's she thinking? What's his angle? Tongues clucking over their mismatched backgrounds. Jake tensed at the refreshment tent, his old suspicions rising. He remembered the bar stares post-discharge, the slurred questions over cheap beer. Hero or headcase? His jaw tightened, his hand was curling around his untouched cider. Tracy squeezed his fingers, her grip a lifeline amid the bustle. Together, she murmured, leaning close. Their eyes are on us because we're interesting, because we don't fit their neat little boxes. Let them stare. She pulled him to the dance floor, under strings of lights that bobbed like earthbound stars. They swayed to a slow waltz, his palm warm at her waist, her hand at his shoulder. When he dipped her, tentatively at first, then with more confidence, she laughed with pure joy. Pride swelled in her chest. The loneliness that had shadowed him since the terminal was banished, it was replaced by purpose and belonging. A local woman nearby muttered something about fancy ladies slumming it, but Tracy just laughed, spinning into Jake's chest. Let them talk, she said. We're the story worth telling. Jake pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers as they swayed. I spent years invisible, or worse, visible for all the wrong reasons. But with you? He paused. I finally feel seen for who I actually am. Good, she whispered. Because I see you, Jake Lang, and I'm not looking away. Elena found them later by the cider press. The apples were crunching underfoot, and her apron dusted with cinnamon. You too, she said, her voice warm as mulled wine. You're like the farm after a storm, bent but not broken, blooming fiercer for the wind. She pulled them both into a hug. Hold tight to what you've built. Roots like yours don't snap easy. Harlan joined them, clapping Jake on the shoulder. Told you the land heals what bullets can't. But it takes the right person standing beside you to make it stick. We're lucky we found each other, Tracy said. Luck had nothing to do with it, Harlan replied with a knowing smile. You both were brave enough to stay when running would have been easier. That's not luck, that's choice. Later that night, after the festival's embers had died and the crowds thinned to echoes, they found themselves in Harlan's truck bed parked at the field's edge. Blankets piled high against the chill, they lay side by side staring up at the vast wheel of stars. I never thought I'd find this, Jake said quietly. Peace. Belonging. You. Tracy rolled to her side, propping herself on one elbow to look down at him. I spent so long building walls, convincing myself I was fine alone. But I wasn't fine. I was just surviving. What about now? Now I'm living. She smiled. Scary as hell, but living. They held each other under the infinite sky, their bodies close but their souls closer. The physical connection was there, warm and real and full of promise, but what mattered most was the emotional anchor they'd become for each other. "No more tests," Jake said, echoing their promise from weeks ago. "No more running," Tracy added. "Just us, building something real." They stayed there until the stars wheeled toward dawn, talking and dreaming and planning. About the farm's future, about Tracy's expanding business, about veterans programs Jake wanted to help create, about the family they might build together, whether through children, adoption, or simply the community they'd gather around them. Every fear shared became lighter. Every dream spoken aloud became more possible. In her arms, Jake felt the anchor hold. The storms were spent, and there were clear skies ahead. In his embrace, Tracy felt the walls finally crumbled. It was no longer needed, and it was no longer wanted. Two broken people, choosing each other every day. Two drifters who'd finally, blessedly, found home. The next morning, they woke tangled in blankets in the truck bed, sunrise painting the fields in shades of gold. Tracy's head rested on Jake's chest, his arm around her shoulders, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, they woke without the weight of yesterday's ghosts crushing them. "Morning," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Morning," she replied, smiling against his shirt. They lay there a moment longer, neither willing to break the spell. The farm was waking around them, birds calling, distant sounds of Harlan starting the morning chores, the promise of coffee and Elena's breakfast waiting. "Ready to face the day?" Tracy asked. Jake tightened his arm around her. "With you? Always." They climbed from the truck bed, folded the blankets, and walked hand in hand back to the farmhouse. Two people who'd arrived broken, who'd found healing in honest soil and each other's arms. The fields whispered their approval in the morning breeze, and for the first time in years, both Jake and Tracy heard it clearly. "Welcome home." If Jake and Tracy's journey pulled you in today, show some love. Hit subscribe, tap like, share this episode with someone who needs a good story, and drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Your support helps this story grow, and I can't wait to have you back for the next chapter. In episode 3, Jake and Tracy step into a new season, one where trust blossoms, winter brings them closer, and love becomes something they can no longer deny. From quiet mornings wrapped in warmth to the magic of the winter festival, these chapters reveal the moment their hearts finally choose each other. And when Jake faces his past and Tracy stands unshaken beside him, their future becomes undeniable. Episode 3 is where healing turns into commitment and whispered dreams become promises. Don't miss it.